Hey there, Bigger Pockets, this is Matt. Here to talk to you guys about 3 lessons that I'm learning as I'm selling one of our apartment complexes. Now, it's funny, I normally don't sell very much. We are just buyers. It's a time to be buying right now, so we typically buy apartment complexes. But right now I'm selling one of our apartment complexes, and 3 lessons are coming up for me that I'd like to share with you today. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Here's lesson number 1. I'm learning what really drives rents in an apartment complex. This is what's interesting. This apartment complex is obviously all in one location, so location gets taken off the table. Unit square footage all gets taken off the table because this is one of these complexes where all the units are the exact same size, everything's identical, so that comes off the table too. Something you would think would drive rents is interesting, and let's talk about that, which is utilities. In some of the apartments, the rent's paid by the landlord, us, and in some of the apartments, the rents are paid by the tenants. And these are, by the way, 5 4-unit apartment complexes. So then they're all in one row, but I'm calling it a 20-unit because they really are, because they're all in one place. It's all one big sale of all the buildings, and so that's that. But what's interesting is different buildings are in different conditions. In one building, there's one boiler that heats the whole building, and in another building, there's 4 boilers controlled by the tenants, so all those heats are in the tenants' names. But in the building where there's one boiler that heats all the units, the landlord, us, is paying for the heat in all the units. Now, you would think that in a unit where the tenants are paying for the heat, the tenants would look at their budget and say, well, geez, the landlord is not paying for that. I have to budget for that, and I only make X amount of dollars per month, so I need to factor that in to the cost of living that I'm taking on. Not so much. What we found is that the units where the landlord pays the heat is priced the same as units where the tenants are paying the heat. There's no difference in those prices. And I had never looked at my numbers like that. I just put the properties out there on Craigslist and got what we could get from them, and you market one unit at a time. But in this complex, I've never just sat and looked at all my rents and looked at them in a comparative manner. But when you go and sell a property, you got to put together a bunch of spreadsheets. You have to discuss properties with buyers and discuss them in a manner that you normally don't discuss them. And a buyer wants to talk about your global rental portfolio versus what each unit's renting for. So what I found is that tenants will pay the same amount of money regardless of who's paying the heat. Here's what really does drive rents, because I've had buyers come through and they say, well, this unit over here is bringing in another $150 versus that unit. And I looked at it. Here's why we get more rents for units, for some units over others. It's simple unit condition. Maybe it seems obvious, but it's not the first reason why you think that the tenants are willing to pay more. And I say unit condition, I'm talking about new kitchen, new bath, nice shiny hardwood floors. So that's a remodeled unit for us, and the kitchen's it's exact same square footage as a unit that doesn't have a new kitchen, but it's just got newer cabinets. It's got newer tile work in the bathroom. It's got just a nicer, fresher look, and the hardwood's been nice and shined as opposed to carpet. And hardwood units always get a few more dollars than carpeted units do. So that drives rent. It even gets you another $150 to $200 a month we make on units that are nice and fresh and clean like that, with everything all brand new. And you would think that it would be on units where, economically it makes better sense for the tenant, where the landlord's paying for the heat. But I have units where the tenant's paying the heat, and it's got a new kitchen, new bath, and shiny hardwood floors, and the tenants are willing to pay more, even though economically you would think it would make sense for them to pay for a not so updated, not a crummy unit. It's just not as updated, but the landlord's paying the heat. Not the case. That's lesson number 1. Lesson number 2, you got to ask the right questions. And who do you ask those questions of, you may ask? And there's 2 people, yourself and the buyer. The questions you got to ask yourself is, why do I really want to sell? What do I want to accomplish out of this? What do I want to do with my sales proceeds? And my wife and I started to ask ourselves those questions at the beginning of this year. And the reason why we were investigating even selling this complex is when we first got started in 2005. That's when I quit that's the last time I had a job, was in 2005. I quit my job to go invest full time. We had a couple of investors come along with us and give us these lines of credit to buy properties, and they got a return on their money and an interest payment on their line of credit that they gave us that allowed us to buy things like a 20-unit apartment complex in New Jersey. So That's been 10 years. And so the monthly payment on those lines of credit it's been there, but it's something that's allowed us to expand our portfolio and grow fairly rapidly, which has been awesome. We've been very grateful for that. That's been 10 years. So the investors are pretty much ready to receive their capital back, which is fine. And that monthly payment has hindered this apartment complex to the point where it didn't perform as great as maybe it could have if it didn't have that monthly payment. We'll get to that in a minute. The second person you have to ask the right questions of is the buyer. Okay, so you ask the right questions of yourself, and then you ask the right questions of the buyer. The best question to ask a buyer is, why are you buying? Okay, everybody always asks the seller, why are you selling? Why are you selling? Well, okay, and that's typically a pretty straight answer, right? But everybody loves to ask that question. But not many people ask a buyer, why are you buying? So, and that's for an investment property, it makes sense. For a home, maybe it's fairly obvious, but for an investment property, it's a good question. And what I found is when I asked people why they were looking to buy, several people told me that they were doing 1031 exchanges. One particular buyer told me that he was doing a 1031 exchange. So the next question I asked is, oh great, what did you sell? And he says, well, I sold a 30-unit apartment complex, and he rattled off the number of what he sold the complex for, and it was much more than what my complex was for sale for. So at first, like, okay, great, well, you can easily afford my complex. I happen to know how 1031 exchanges work. You got to spend all the money if you want to get the tax benefits from it. So he would have had to have bought my complex and another smaller investment that's priced less than my investment was. It was going to get complicated. So as soon as he told me that, I started to think, this guy's going to have to do a really complicated transaction to do my deal. He seemed interested, but in the back of my little head, I'm thinking, this guy is probably not going to do this deal because it's going to be complicated for him, and he's going to have to find something else that's going to be comfortable for him to get into, and all the little cosmic tumblers are going to have to work for that transaction. So I knew that in my head, and I took him as seriously as I needed to show him the complex, and lo and behold, a week later, he seemed interested, but he sent me an email saying, as much as I like your complex, it's going to be too complicated of a transaction to do a 1031 exchange at your price point. And so we moved on. But because I asked those questions, I became aware of it even before he did. That this purchase was going to be a problem for him because I was priced much less than where I think he needed to be. So that's lesson number 2: asking the right questions. Lesson number 3 that I'd like to share with you that I picked up when I'm selling this apartment complex is about financing. So the apartment complex that we're selling, it's done okay. I promise you, Liz and I are not going to miss it while we're sleeping at night. We're not going to lose sleep over this apartment complex because it's done okay financially. The main reason why it's done okay financially is because of those line of credit payments to those investors. And just sometimes they make money, sometimes they break even, sometimes they've lost a few dollars, but over the long haul they've done okay. Not great, And what's interesting is at first I looked at the complexes and I said, nobody else is going to want to buy these because they don't do that great financially. But if you're looking to sell a property, if you take out your debt position, and you just look at just the net operating income, I did that for our complex. We realized that the complex actually would do very well for someone in the right situation. If they laid down the right amount of equity and got the right type of financing, they'd get a fantastic return on their investment. So I let go of the concept that just because it doesn't work for me doesn't mean it's going to work for someone else. And so a property that you may own may not do well for you financially, but the question is it not doing well for you financially because of the debt and the situation and the equity that you're into on the property, or is it not doing well because it's just not a good deal? So what I discovered was our property didn't do well because of the way that we structured the equity and the debt on it. Once we took that out in our evaluations, it actually does pretty well. And so we're getting a lot of interest on the complex, and I think that we're going to get a good sales number for it, but that was a good lesson that I got. So those are the 3 things, guys. I hope that you can take them home and get some value out of it. Please leave comments below. Let's get some conversation going. Let's talk about some things that you've learned, maybe when you sold some things in the past in selling investment properties and that. So thank you so much for watching, and I sure appreciate you, and I hope you have a great and profitable week.